And welcome to the second snow survey of the season up here at Phillips Station. We are up here with the California Department of Water Resources for this snow survey. And of course, this is the February snow survey. Interested to see what the numbers will reveal, but just a little bit about who is on the course today. So the survey is being led by Andy Rising, the manager of DWR's Snow Surveys and Water Supply Forecasting Unit. So they just got on site and they are doing their very first measurement on the snow course. Now, just a little bit of background, this snow survey team will go to 6 different spots and use the blue snow tube that you see Jacob holding to get measurements. Now, those 6 measurements will then be averaged to give us the amount of snow at this location. And if you're wondering what the heck they're doing with the tape measure, well, that is to ensure that they are measuring at the same spot every single time. So as Jacob is getting ready to make the first measurement, he drives the snow tube into the snow, making sure he wants to hit dirt, and that means that he's getting a really good core sample of the snow itself. Now, those measurements, as I mentioned earlier, are taken at the same 6 exact locations each survey. Now, that step provides reliability when reporting averages and trends of how the site's snowpack is doing compared to previous months or years. And of course, that's one of the numbers that Andy gives once he comes up to the mic at the end of the snow survey to give not only the snow totals at this site, but also how the snow is doing statewide. So how is the state looking so far? Well, this year, once again, is another example of how California's seasons can swing between extremes. We had some atmospheric rivers in mid to late December, and that brought the right conditions for snow to be on the ground for the first snow survey, which looked pretty good. And while it was a good start, well, the following storms were warm, which means below average snowpack accumulation, and then the rest of January has been pretty dry, along with warmer temperatures, which typically means snowpack loss. So we'll wait to see what those numbers are when Andy gives his update. Now, a little bit of information about snow surveys. Now, this one location at Phillips Station right here is one out of 260 snow courses, more than 260 snow courses that are manually measured statewide through the California Cooperative Snow Surveys program. That program was established in 1929, and the California Department of Water Resources is now the lead agency overseeing the program, and that includes a total of 50 participating federal, state, local, and private agencies. The goal of that program is to predict how much water we'll have in the summer months when the snow begins to melt. And the snowpack, as you may have heard, is about a third of California's water supply, so if you think of it as a giant frozen reservoir. That snowmelt feeds into the rivers and reservoirs, and it's then used for agriculture, drinking water, as well as supporting nature. Now, one of the reasons why we pay attention to snow surveys, along with how much water we're going to get, is because that can lead into how much water DWR can deliver through the state water project. And those recent warm and dry conditions can impact the water that's provided to 27 million Californians, as well as agriculture and businesses throughout the state. So each year, DWR announces an allocation, which is how much water we expect to deliver to the water agency so they can help plan out their year. However, that allocation number can change based on conditions, and there are various factors that decide the allocation percentage, but one of the biggest is snow surveys, because the snow surveys measure how much water is stored in the snow, and the more snow with good water content means more runoff and more available water. So then with that, let's talk about the snow tube that Jacob is using in doing his next measurement. Now, that snow tube was developed in the early 1900s by Dr. James Church, a professor of physics at the University of Nevada at Reno. And it was originally called the Mount Rose Sampler because Dr. Church would march up Mount Rose to take the measurements. It's a really simple device, but it's very effective. It measures in inches to know how deep the snowpack is, and then that tube is then weighed to determine the density of the snowpack. So we know how much water is stored in the snow. The tube is set so 1 ounce of snow measured is 1 inch of water content, and the water content and depth gives us the water density. So light fluffy snow wouldn't have much water as heavy snow, and it's pretty compacted now, so I'll be curious to see what those numbers reveal since we've had such a dry January. And once we get those measurements, Andy will come up after doing his totals and give the report probably in about 15 minutes after he does his last measurement. But in the meantime, we'll let you enjoy the sights of the snow survey. And welcome back. If you are just joining us, we are in the middle of the second snow survey of the season for the California Department of Water Resources. We're up here live at Phillips Station, and Jacob there holding the snow tube is now driving it into the snow, making his fifth measurement so far of this survey. There will be a total of 6 measurements that take place. The snow survey team, being led by Andy Rising, who is holding the clipboard there, will average out those 6 different measurements to give us the snow totals at this location. So of course, Andy will be reporting on the snow amounts here at Phillips Station for February, also taking a look back at some of the previous measurements as well. But one of the things that he will also talk about is in comparison to the April 1st measurement. And sometimes if you've followed us before, you've heard about April 1st or the April 1 measurement. And we refer to that average because in terms of snow water content, that is typically when the snowpack is at its peak each year in the Sierra Nevada. So the snow over time has accumulated, it's solidified, and then after that April 1 date, typically the sun is then at a angle where snow melt begins to take place, and then we're not really building that much snow. So while there has been some dry weather, we'll wait and see what will happen and what Andy will report once he finishes up his 6 different measurements, and of course give it in comparison to April 1. But we've got a couple more snow surveys to go until we reach that, and so we'll wait and see what happens throughout February and March to see if we can get a little bit closer to that April 1 average. So that is the 5th measurement that they're just wrapping up. They're about to do their 6th and final, and then they'll do some calculations, and then Andy will come to the podium to give the results. So stick with us. We'll be back even once this live stream cuts out for Andy to give his report in about 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us here today up at Phillips Station for the 2nd snow survey of the year here at Phillips. My name is Jason Entz. I'm an information officer with the California Department of Water Resources. In a moment, I'm going to welcome up Andy Rising, manager of DWR's Snow Surveys and Water Supply Forecasting Unit, to talk about today's results, and then we'll be taking some questions. Snow surveys like the one we saw here today provide critical information for reservoir operators and water managers across the state to understand how much snowmelt will eventually make its way into our reservoirs and rivers in the spring and summer. And gathering this data would not be possible without our partners at the California Cooperative Snow Surveys Program, which consists of over 50 agencies that every year help contribute the data that DWR uses to create accurate water supply forecasts. These water supply forecasts provide a critical and important picture into water availability and water supply in the coming years, and are important factors in state water project allocation decisions. The state of California has been measuring the snowpack here at Phillips Station since 1941, And today it's just one of over 260 snow courses across the state that are measured every winter by DWR and our partners with the California Cooperative Snow Surveys program. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Andy to talk about today's results.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Yes, my name is Andy Rising, A-N-D-Y-R-E-I-S-I-N-G. I'm manager of the Snow Surveys and Water Supply Forecasting Unit at DWR. So great to see you guys here this year. So getting to the results, our survey today recorded a snow depth of 23 inches and a snow water content of 8 inches. That represents 46% of average for this date and 33% of the April 1st average at this location. We refer to the April 1 metric because that is typically when we see a peak in our snowpack. It builds during the winter and then starts to ablate with the higher sun angle and greater radiation that we receive. So that's why we always refer to April 1. And based on this morning's data from our automated snow sensor network, the statewide snowpack stands a little bit better at 59% of average for this date. So still below average, but a little bit stronger in the south. Last year, our February 1 survey resulted in a water content of 8 inches, which is exactly where we're at today. So we were behind last year and we ended up catching up. We still have some months ahead. So in addition, we're at 46% of average for this location at the statewide pillow snowpack, and that was 69% of average. Let me state that again. Last year, our February 1 survey resulted in a water content of 8 inches, which was 46% of average for this location, and the statewide pillow snowpack was 69% of average. So statewide, we're about 10% less than we were last year at this time. Last year, our although today's results are below average, we still have some time to catch up before the critical April 1 measurements. Current forecasts don't predict any significant precipitation or snow for the next 2 weeks. Every week that goes by without major snowfall makes it harder for us to catch up and allows mountain soils to dry out, which can hinder snowmelt runoff later in the year when reservoirs are expected to fill. We did get rain in November, December, and early January, and that did push the state above average for precipitation, but mountain soils are now showing signs of drying out. Those early season storms provided strong early precipitation totals, but tended to accumulate significant snow only in the higher elevations. They did not deliver as much of a benefit in the northern Sierra, where our two largest reservoirs are located, Oroville and Shasta. And the region's snowpack remains about 40% of average. Above average temperatures and dry conditions since the first week of January have eaten into our early snowpack gains, with the snowpack volume decreasing about 5% since the storms at the start of the month. And this is not the time that we want to be going backwards. We are now about halfway through the typically wettest part of the year, which are December through March, when we should be seeing the most snowpack gains. We still have February and March, but each dry week we have will make it more difficult to catch up. That's what I had.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Andy. Appreciate it. So with that now, I'll go ahead and open it up to questions. If anyone up here has any questions.
I was just going to say, since we had some really massive storms right around Christmas and New Year's, which had the snow that accumulated largely has melted, would the snow melt from that contribute at all to the reservoir?
Yeah, so
Give us a better number overall.
exactly, yeah. So thank you for the question. So obviously, like we just mentioned, it's been pretty dry, but we did have significant storms, which most of the snowpack is from those big storms we had around Christmas and the first of the year. So you mentioned the snowpack, we've lost about 5%. What happens to that snowmelt that we've seen, that 5% of volume? Has that been going into our reservoirs as well?
Yeah, and the big storms, atmospheric rivers, brought a lot of precipitation. So our precipitation is above average, which is, the totals of rainfall, whereas it didn't necessarily fall as snow at the lower elevations. And so that hit the ground, likely ran off and likely into our reservoirs. So yes, and that saturated our soils, which increases the runoff to the reservoirs. And then anything that might have melted. I mean, we measured another course today, down a little bit lower in elevation, and remarked that, I haven't seen this kind of much liquid running under the snowpack at this time of year. So it's been warm, and so that is running off. It is in the creeks and it is in the rivers and headed to the reservoirs. But it's not. Thankfully, it's not a lot. 5% is some, but again, we don't want to be going backwards this time of year. So we need some more storms.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So a little bit about what happens if we do continue to be below average and we get to April 1st and we're still below average then.
Yeah. Oh boy. So we've seen these, we've had these years before. Every year is different. We have so much variability in California's, how the rain falls and snow falls each year. And so we've been in this position before, and we've caught up in the past, and some years, and we haven't in others. So it's really too early to predict, but having 2 weeks ahead of us that we know is unlikely to produce any more snowpack and precipitation, that doesn't look good. That's less time to catch up before our peak April 1st metric that we look for. So about a month and a half for some storms, but it doesn't take too many atmospheric rivers. One or two big ones that could be cold could catch us up, but we need those to happen, and there's no guarantee. That's the problem. So if we end up lower in average, then yes, then we'll be looking at lower volumes. Not necessarily the reservoirs, they're still pretty healthy from the previous 3 years. So we'll have to see how that works out. But right now we're in a pretty good position reservoir-wise. But we do hope for more snow that we can almost, we would like to have the guarantee every year, which doesn't happen. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, great. Well, if there's no more questions, I'd like to thank everyone for coming up and joining us here today. So we have 2 more snow surveys left in the season before our important April 1. We have one coming up in the beginning of March, and then we'll, of course, our important April 1 survey right around the start of April. That's typically when we see our peak snowpack. So keep tuning in. We'll see you all again here in about 1 month. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.